Hello, everybody, and welcome to Heart-Like Vedic Astrology. In today's talk, I was going to discuss Kuja Dosha or Mangalik Yoga, two different names for the same thing, essentially. And the subtitle, I guess, is What's Love Got to Do with It? So this has to do with love and relationships. This talk is from a Vedic astrology perspective, so Jyotish, as it's known as in Sanskrit, which is ancient Indian astrology that's more than 5,000 years old. So let's take a look at what we've got here today. Just a note first, all of my teaching videos on the subject of Vedic astrology, Jyotish, are my concepts playlist. They can be found there. Wherever you see a double asterisk in one of my talks, that means there's a teaching video on that subject if you'd like to learn more. Also, my channel is all about playlists so that different topic areas are easy to find all the relevant videos. So, like, I have a planets grahas playlist, a houses bhavas playlist, a yogas combinations playlist, and there are others. Also, if you'd like to learn astrology by looking at famous birth charts, I have a video titled Birth Chart Archive List 2024, where I have a list of a lot of the famous birth charts I've analyzed on the channel. So, famous people, places, moments, and time. And I'll be updating that video pretty soon to add all the new videos. But there's a lot in there. So, if you're looking for famous birth charts, that's where I look for that. Also, if you're new to Vedic astrology or need a review, other videos to watch with this one to get more out of this talk, North, South, and East Indian style charts. I do cover Western style charts in that video as well. Introduction to navigating a birth chart. Lagna, also known as the Ascendant, rising sign or first house. Introduction to constellations or rashis. Planetary exaltation, debilitation, or Ucha Nisha. Swagrahas, or planets in their own sign or star. And also the symbolism of Mars, because this combination really is all about Mars. And then actually the different houses. So I have a whole playlist on houses and bhavas, so I would check those out. Okay, so what is Kuja Dosha, also known as Mangalik Yoga? What does that mean? So yoga, translated from Sanskrit, is basically a planetary combination. So that's kind of when we have certain planets in certain houses and other planets are in certain houses, and there's a whole special combination there. We can get sort of these meta effects in somebody's when we're analyzing somebody's birth chart. Okay, so there's lots and lots of different yogas. This is just one of many. And Kuja Dosha specifically, or Mangalik Yoga, Kuja and Mangal are two different names for the planet Mars. Okay. So this is a Mars planetary combination. And dosha means imbalance or defect or blemish. Okay. So there's a problem with Mars, essentially, is what you can loosely translate Kuja dosha or Mangalik as. Okay. So what's the definition? Like, how would we know when we're looking at a birth chart if somebody has a Kuja dosha or Mangalik yoga? Well, we would be looking at the placement of Mars. So if Mars is in the first, second, fourth, seventh, eighth, or 12th house, from the Lagna, you start there. So the Lagna is the rising sign, ascendant, first house. You can start there. Then somebody has a Mangalik yoga or a Kuja dosha. Okay. Now the thing is that the effects of this Kuja dosha are amplified or multiplied if you also have Mars in the same horoscope. That's first, second, fourth, seventh, eighth, or 12th house from the moon and or the Venus. So especially when you get Mars that's in one of these houses from all 3 points, the Lagna, the moon, and the Venus, then it's a really strong Kuja dosha. Okay, so some of this terminology may be new to you, especially if you're new to all this. So if we take a look to the right here, where I have a little mock-up chart. Okay, I use North Indian style charts in my work, so this is a North Indian style chart. And so to find the rising sign, ascendant, first house, or Lagna, those are all different names for the same thing. You go to that top diamond in the middle. Okay, and there happens to be a little 4 in the bottom corner. A little 4 in the bottom corner does not mean fourth house, it means fourth zodiac sign, which is Cancer or Karka in Sanskrit. So I have a Cancer rising chart here. Okay, since this is a North Indian style chart, to get to the other houses, you count inclusively from the first house counterclockwise all the way around. So if the first house has Mars in black, right over that little 4, then to get to the second house, you go up and to the left, where you have Mars circled in green, and it's above the 5. That's the second house. And then you keep going around until you get to the 12th house, okay? So when you have Mars in 1, 2, 4, 7, 8, or 12. So you can see in this chart, I've put Mars, it's black Mars, in all those places. So we have Mars in the first, Mars in the second, Mars on the 4th, Mars in the 7th, Mars in the 8th, and Mars in the 12th, okay? So already this will tell you that, a lot of people, more than half of people have this combination. Okay, it's not uncommon. Okay. But again, as I mentioned, if you have Mars also 1, 2, 4, 7, 8, or 12 from the moon and or Venus, then it's even stronger. So then I put in this chart just for fun, moon in the 5th house, and I put Venus in the 11th house from the Lagna, from the rising sign ascendant first house. Okay. So we can see then what I've done with these different Mars placed in different houses is that, you can spin this in your mind, or some people can literally spin it like if they're using software or something. But if we spin the chart so the moon in this 8th constellation or Scorpio is at the top, then would any of these Mars be 1, 2, 4, 7, or 8, 12 houses from the moon? Well, I've circled them in the same purple color that the moon is. Okay. So from the moon, if you start at the moon in the Scorpio in the 5th house, and you count inclusively 1, 2, 3, 4, you'll get to this Mars in the bottom right corner where there's 11. The 11 stands for the 11th zodiac sign of Aquarius or Kumbh. Okay. So this Mars is also Mangalik or Kuja Dosha from the moon. So that's a stronger Kuja Dosha than the one next to it, before it, where Mars is in the bottom diamond with a 10 in it. Okay. And then there are more from the moon position. So from the moon position, if we count 8 away, so it doesn't have any, it doesn't have any in the first house with the moon. It doesn't have any in the second house with the moon. It does have this, what I just mentioned, this 4th house from the moon, the Mars in Aquarius with the 11 in it. So from the 7th house, no, there's no Mars, there's Venus. From the 8th house, yes, you have this Mars in Gemini, the 3rd constellation. So Mars with that little 3 in the upper right corner that's circled both in green and purple. This is Kuja Dosha from the moon as well. Okay, so we have a doubling up effect of that Mars. Okay, and then from there, that's 8th. And then the 12th house, is there a Mars? 12 houses from the moon? Yes, you have Mars in Libra. Okay, it's circled in purple. So there are three of these Mars that I've placed are actually Mangalik or Kuja Dosha from the moon as well. So it's a double effect. Then if we go from Venus, does Venus have Mars in the same house? The first house? No. Does Venus have Mars from the second house from Venus? Yes. That's that Mars that's circled in green and purple in the 12th house. So this Mars that's in the 12th house is actually Mangalik from 3 different positions, the Lagna rising sign, the moon, and Venus, all 3 of them. So this is a very, very strong Kuja Dosha in the 12th house. Okay, so we'll keep going with Venus. So does Venus have a Mars 4th from it? Yes, it does. That Mars in the 2nd house with the little 5 that's in Leo. And then from there, does Venus have a Mars in the 7th house from it? No, it has Moon. Does Venus have a Mars in the 8th house from it? No, nothing there. Does Venus have any other? Does Venus have a Mars 12 houses from it? No, there's nothing there. Okay, so from the Lagna, from the rising sign, there are 1, 2, 3, 4. All 6 Mars placements are Mangalik. Then from the moon, 3 of them are additionally Mangalik from the moon, if we count from the moon. Additionally, 2 of them are Mangalik from Venus. Okay, so the one Mars that's Mangalik from all three positions, the rising sign or Lagna, Moon, and Venus, is this Mars in the 12th house, just so we're clear. Okay, so this is going to be that's going to be the big one, in this chart. Again, if somebody had Mars, in all these different places, but if in a Cancer rising chart, Moon was in the 5th house, Venus was in the 11th house, and then Mars was in the 12th, that means that you're going to have triple Mangalik years. Okay. So why are we even looking at these things? Okay, like what are these things? Like why are we looking at Mars? Why are we looking at Venus? Why are we looking at the Moon? Well, Mars is a planet. As a planet, if you've seen my Mars symbolism video, is a contentious, rebellious, erratic, fighting planet. It's fiery. It's hot. It symbolizes things like the commander in chief of the army. Okay. So when you have that energy in different placements in your chart, that'll bring that fieriness, for better or worse. Now, again, we're talking about, I just mentioned briefly in the title of the talk, what's love got to do with it? Well, the problem is that, it's kind of like, well, are you going to be a lover or fighter in your relationship? So, and then we'll talk about the different houses, like why 1, 2, 4, 7, 8, and 12. But let me talk about the other planets first. So Mars, we know, is like a fighting, rebellious type of energy. Okay. It's not necessarily motivated or oriented towards harmony and peace and compassion, diplomacy. Okay. It can be hot-headed and impulsive and this sort of thing. Okay. Now, Moon and Venus, those two are the emotional planets. The Moon specifically is like the intuitive mind, the sensory mind, and Venus is love and romance. Okay. So that's why you want Mars to be positively placed from these other two planets, like in alignment as opposed to in some sort of opposition or negative placement. Okay, so that's why we're looking at these three different planets here. Now, why are we looking at 1, 2, 4, 7, 8, and 12 houses? Well, all of these houses are related to relationships and or marriage in some way. So the first house, or bhava is a Sanskrit name for house, is the self, is the general nature of a person. So if they have Mars right at the top here, like in this chart, there's Mars in Cancer. Well, especially in Mars in Cancer, Mars is debilitated in Cancer. This is going to be somebody who's really quite erratic, and here, there, everywhere, we're probably nowhere at the same time, and quite contentious as well. And Cancer happens to be a movable water sign, meaning it's a very emotional. There's a lot of emotional churn for somebody who has Mars in Cancer rising chart. Okay. So Mars in the top is going to set the tone because the rising sign, first house, Lagna, Ascendant, all different names for the same thing. That first house, Lagna, sets the tone for the rest of the chart. So if Mars is right there at the top, already you're dealing with a pretty fiery person. Okay. Now the second house, why the second house? The second house indicates family, inner circle, but also speech. So if we have Mars in the second house, there can be fighting with family, fighting with close, inner circle people, and also like fiery speech, potentially. Okay, and we're not even thinking about really the other planets so far, except, again, I just wanted to give you an example of Mars, checking out Mars position from the Moon and Venus, okay? But you'd have to figure that out in whatever real chart you're looking at. And what about the fourth house? The fourth house represents home and happiness. So when we have Mars in the fourth house, typically somebody has a hard time settling down. They're kind of like rebelling against also the family line. Um, it's just not a very settled, complacent, content kind of energy in home and happiness. And the seventh house, symbolizes spouse-like partner relationships, like business partnerships. And when you have Mars in the seventh house, that can again be fighting, contentiousness, rebelliousness. And especially when you have, like Mars in the first house, Mars also aspects into the fourth house, seventh house, and the eighth house. So, that's good. So when somebody has Mars in the Lagna, it's like, what is it? 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 out of 6 houses that are related to relationships and marriage are going to have this fighting, contentious energy. Okay. If Mars is in the seventh house of spouse and relationships, it's going to aspect into the first house and also the second house. So there's going to be fighting, between like a couple, but also, fighting with, you know, um, speech, angry speech, potentially. Then Mars in the eighth house. The eighth house represents things like marriage, partners' longevity, and also deep psychology. So when we have Mars there, Mars can be related to things like accidents, injuries, infections, that sort of thing. So when we have Mars in the eighth house, that's why it can like curtail like somebody's life potentially. Not always, potentially, okay. And then again, deep psychology. So again, it's almost like the Lagna, where when you have Mars in the eighth house, this person, even if they don't express it, on the surface, in their external world, deep down, they've got some pretty angry, rebellious thoughts. Okay. And then the 12th house relates to expenses, losses, and also, as part of that, sex as well. So when we have Mars there, this can be like erratic, behavior along those lines. Okay. Or also like just having Mars in the 12th house, it can be lost through erratic behavior. Because Mars represents behavior, actions. It's an action-oriented planet, but the nature of Mars, because of its trajectory in the sky, it's not as like predictable. It's not as straight as a lot of the other planets. So that's why it's considered to have an erratic energy to it, and impulsive, and like that sort of thing. So now you know why houses 1, 2, 4, 7, 8, and 12 are involved. Again, the main thing is that all six of these houses are related to relationships and marriage. What does all this mean? Like, what does all this bring potentially now that we can, identify it more or less? What does all this bring potentially? So, way back when, and I don't know exactly when, because there isn't a whole lot written about Kuja Dosha or Mangalik yoga in Shastra, classical texts on Jyotish. But this is something that's sort of commonly known about. Like if you say, "Oh, somebody's Mangalik," um, people in like India will usually know what you mean. Okay, and what that. Okay. Now it used to mean at some point that there would be early death of spouse. Now that can't be true. Okay. Because again, we're talking about six houses so far, and if we just check from the Lugna, six houses from that means at least half of all people are Kujadosha or Mangalik Yoga. And then if you also check from the moon position and also you check from the Venus, I mean, it's more than half of all horoscopes are going to have this. Okay. So that means nobody would be getting married. Because that's the thing is some people think if somebody's Mangalik, you need to avoid them as a partner. Okay. Now that's not all true. But the thing is, it's sort of, there's still problems in relationships, not necessarily early death of spouse, but there can be marital misery, like unhappiness in marriage or long-term partnerships. Marriage like a relationship. And again, you don't need to avoid all partners with this combination. We'll talk about like some caveats, like how you can ameliorate this a bit or deal with this energy if you have it or if you know somebody who has it. I was just going to mention that like there is a little bit written about like uh, what Mars will bring if it's in the first, second, fourth, seventh, eighth, or 12th house. Now, again, some of this doesn't all necessarily have to do with relationships, you'll see here. But it still gives you like a certain sense or energy or vibe about the person when they have Mars in these houses and why it may be problematic in relationships overall. Okay. So when Mars is in the first house, it could be somebody who has a short life or the body will be bruised. So again, that gets back to the Mars energy of like, activities, injuries, accidents, infections, that sort of thing, wounds or scars, like when Mars is in the first house. Okay. Which again, scars come from usually accidents, injuries. Yeah. Or surgery. Mars also represents surgery. Okay. Then the second house, if Mars is there, somebody may not be good looking. Again, that depends on the whole chart. I wouldn't take that by itself, but may not be good looking. May not be clever in speaking because the second house represents speech. Remember, I said that. So they might be like, again, impulsive and just blurt out things that are, hurtful or destructive to relationships rather than bridging gaps with people. We'll have tearing. I don't know what that means. I don't know if it literally means of the eyes or of the body or what. So I put a question mark there. I don't know tearing of what. Void of wealth because second house represents assets. When Mars is there can be like, impulsive spending or depletion of assets, that sort of thing. And then work for low people potentially. When Mars is in the fourth house, the person can be bereft of mother because the fourth house represents mother, friends, happiness, vehicles, and land because the fourth house represents all these things. So again, because Mars is this erratic energy, there's not this like settling and growing and expanding energy. It's like this turning energy. Okay. Then the seventh house, they might indulge in undesirable behavior. And part of that is because Mars is aspecting from the seventh house, aspecting to the first. Okay. So be afflicted by disease. We've been talking about that. And the spouse may die prematurely, not necessarily all the time, but there's a possibility. Because the spouse might have an injury or accident. That's why. Then the eighth house, again, disease, because the eighth house represents chronic disease. Deprived of wealth. That may be because it's aspecting the second house. And also, one, two, three, four. It's also from the eighth house, Mars is also aspecting the 11th house of income. So Mars is on both the big money houses, 2 and 11 from the eighth house. Short-lived again because the eighth house also can represent longevity um, or health of the native and of the horoscope. And reviled by others. I'm not exactly sure why. This may have to do with Mars aspecting the 11th house from the 8th, because 11th house not only represents income, but it represents clubs, groups, society, and friends and stuff like that. Yeah. Then the 12th house, when Mars is in the 12th house, it could be the person can be a talebearer, be cruel, be devoid of spouse, be mean. Um, and again, because the Mars is in the 12th house, it's like losses through erratic actions and impulsive behavior and that sort of thing. And eye disease, because the 12th house can represent eyes. The second and 12th house can represent eyes, so that may be where that comes from. So again, not to be all doom and gloom for sure, again, because most people have this. So if you have it, you're in good company. But how do people manage this energy from a Vedic astrology perspective? Well, one is that if you're Mangalik, if you have this Kuja Dosha, and if you marry somebody else with it, then that potentially can cancel out. And I've read some caveats to this, the caveat of the caveat. This seems to some people have the feeling or under the impression that this is more likely to be true, okay, if there is a benefic involved with Mars. And the best benefic is Jupiter. Okay, so when you have the strong Jupiter with Mars and one or both charts, horoscopes, when you're matching people up, then that can cancel out the Mangalikness between the two people. You know. Also, Mars as a planet has a maturation at 28 years. So after 30 years of age, it's unlikely that this will produce much in somebody's life. Now, there might be other reasons why somebody has relationship problems or marital problems, but it may not be due to this Kuja dosha because it's sort of like, there's a maturation process because Mars as a planet represents like a young person or teenager, like a fairly young person. Again, that kind of impulsive, slightly immature kind of nature. And so once you get to 30 years old, then, probably don't have to worry about it so much. And so, that cutoff though is like, sort of around 28 years. And some people, but that's the thing is some people think, 30 years old is really old to get married and they may not want to wait that long. Another thing that can, kind of shift this energy and make it less, um, you know, um, undesirable, I guess you could say. When Mars is in its own or swa position, its own house or swa position or exalted position, that may also cancel the Mars because Mars, when Mars is exalted or swa, it's going to act in its best possible way, even though it's a natural malefic planet. So, yeah, but again, it depends on what other planets are going on or where they are and the condition of the other planets and all this sort of thing. And what, even if it's in a a negative house, I would still consider that, but it may be better. Like it may not be just a knockdown, drag out, blowout fight, or I've seen some horoscopes and I've read for some people that it was like you could just see from their horoscope it was like nonstop fighting, and people were like, yeah, it was like every day, no matter what, no matter what the topic, it's like we were just fighting about everything nonstop. So yeah, and then another thing is that like Moon in the same house as Mars may cancel it. So some people are under that impression. And there are others as well, but these are some of the big ones, okay? The other thing you might find is that Mars upayas or remedies can be used. So like chanting mantras involving Mars or um, making donations, like financial donations to Martian type endeavors, so like police or military or that sort of thing. Um, Mars, also the color associated with Mars is like bright red, kind of like this talk. The slides I'm using here, bright red. So if you donate red items, like maybe red lentils to people who don't have enough food, or red clothing to, homeless shelters or something like that. That can potentially be helpful, because again, part of what we, part of the basis of Vedic astrology is that all of this is based on karma, you know. So we're always trying to help people, improve their karma so that they have better outcomes. The other thing you might find is that some people will create sham marriages. Like you might have heard some people get like married to a tree or a pot of water or like a animal like a cow or something like that as their first marriage. So that basically this sort of it's thought that this like, Kuja Dosha Mangalik energy will sort of be, you know, um, drained, through having this sham marriage, um, to a non-human being, and so all that negative karma will be drained. To what extent, I don't know. I haven't done that. I've never suggested it to somebody. I don't know. I know a few people who have done that actually, but I don't know their chart, so I don't know what to say about that. But it does happen. So if you've heard of somebody marrying a tree or a cow in India, this might be part of the reason why. So just FYI. Okay, so anyway, hopefully you're seeing from all this is that if you've heard of Kuja Dosha or Mangalik and you yourself have heard not so great things, just know that most of us are in this boat, and there are ways to manage this so that it's not like, again, all love is lost, okay, by any means. All right, so there you go. Mangalik Yoga, Kuja Dosha. So as always, I want to thank you for stopping by, listening to one of my talks. I appreciate all the support you give me, my work, and the channel, and all the different ways that you guys do that. So subscribing and liking videos and posting comments and sending in donations and sharing videos and stuff. All of it is, just really fantastic. So thank you for all of that. Again, all my teaching videos on the subject of Vedic astrology are in my concepts playlist. They can be found there. For more famous birth charts, you can find my birth chart archive list 2024 video. See a list of those up to this point, or up to earlier this year. I got to do another one because again, I've been doing a lot of videos and a lot of charts. So I think there'll be an annual update on that one. The archive list, birth chart archive list. Also, I do offer personal birth chart readings, so if that's interesting to you, you can email heartlightastro@yahoo.com for more info. I do those live on Zoom, on Skype as recorded video, and I also offer gift certificates if you ever want to give somebody a reading. I do have another YouTube channel on natural medicine where I discuss Ayurveda, traditional Indian medicine, yoga, as well as other paradigms of medicine like homeopathy, naturopathic medicine. And the name of that channel is Nature Source Care, so that's out there too. So, as always, I hope you found this talk helpful, useful, and interesting to you as you learn to navigate the energy cycles of your own life. All right, so take good care, and until the next one, namaste.